guest today is Anna Malkova, IDW comic book artist. Hi, Anna. Thanks for being here.
No problem at all. I'm so excited to join the convention. I haven't talked to a lot of people recently, so please forgive me for being way too excited in some bits.
Oh,
So cool to see you all.
so great to see you too. I know we've all been stuck in quarantine, so this is a good opportunity to connect and plan, and talk about the convention and everything. Sorry, my dog is like barking at me. Anna is the lead artist for the IDW Transformers 2019 mainline ongoing comics series. A longtime Transformers fan now turned pro, she draws all the gore and emotional devastation with much love and care. An avid horror and sci fi fan hailing from Moscow, Russia, and currently residing in Cyprus, she shares her time between making video games, drawing comics, and definitely not talking to plants. So thank you so much again for being a part of our event. It's an honor to be talking with you and to have you here.
Thank you for inviting me. It's a great pleasure to be here together with you and joining the convention. I'm so excited for all the other panelists, and hopefully I don't feeble mine.
Oh, well, we're very happy to have you here, and I'm super excited to hear what you have to share and talk about today.
Thank you.
So, we're going to first start talking about your background. So, how did you get into Transformers?
Well, I didn't actually grow up with the brand because, um, like, I don't want to describe it as a sad childhood, but I didn't have a lot of toys and uh, I didn't have a lot of access to Western media. I actually first saw a cartoon around like 12 years old, I think. And I think it was something Barbie related. And mostly I've been growing up in books. So became kind of aware of Transformers via cultural osmosis around the time Transformers animated became a thing, when the first movie came out, and you're like, oh, robots. And I've been a great fan of sci-fi my whole life, from Stanislav Lem, Strugatsky's, Shackley, Heinlein. I've been reading a lot. And so I became kind of aware of Transformers, but I wasn't actually into them until one of my university friends showed me Last Stand of the Wreckers book, and she was like, hey, read this. This is perfect sci-fi action. You're going to love it. And I loved it. And from that day, I was so engrossed in Transformers. It's been like on the foreground of my consciousness for the past decade. Yeah, and so I'm here. Like, I have seen every show since then. I have read almost everything, um, excluding the movie adaptation books and some such things that are quite hard to find. And I've been very involved and with the fandom as well. So yeah. And at some point, I kind of like became one of the people who contribute to the lore, and it's still quite scary because it's like having an opportunity to do something great and be in constant fear that you're going to mess it up.
Oh, well, you've done a great job so
Oh,
far with
thank
the new
you.
IDW comics. Like, I always love seeing the new issues and seeing your work.
I'm so excited about it.
Oh, well, we're
Like
very
there's such
excited for you.
uh, thank you. There's such a thing that when I was most active in the fandom, it was an era during the first and a bit a second season of Robots in Disguise, More Than Meets the Eye, the late TF Prime, and the heyday of Tumblr fandom. So a lot of people that I've used to share this passion with, they kind of either drifted away or completely fell off the radar. So right now my fandom involvement only has like several people and I don't talk a lot to other people because There's such a thing. Like, sorry, I'm jumping off from point to point, but
Oh,
I
it's
have a
totally
lot to talk
fine.
about. There's such a thing as in critical analysis of cultural works, there's such thing as death of the author, which basically permits to separating the work from its creator. And I'm quite a big proponent of my personal views, my personal life, and what I am, not being as interconnected, not being an auteur, not being interconnected with the media I create, so that people will not color the work created by what I am, because people change all the time, but work, once it's created, it remains. It's going to be there. So I'd rather be like not very vocal about things and stuff I put into work, but rather people finding the stuff I've put in by themselves. It's been so exciting to see bits and pieces on Twitter where people realize what I've actually done without me actually talking about it. Like, that's been so rewarding. Yeah,
That's really cool. That's really cool how you've separated yourself from the work you create. And it sounds like that you really care about what you're creating and contributing to Transformers. So it's really exciting.
thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, I noticed that too with the end of Lost Light, that a lot of fans seem to drift away from Transformers. So it's just
I
been a
mean,
little
Lost
different.
Light and More Than Meets the Eye are tremendous stories, and they are tremendous in the sense that they've connected to a lot of people outside of the Transformers fan base, and a lot of people who didn't actually like knew what Transformers were. They encountered this book and they stayed along for the ride, and it's great. And the thing is, with every generation, with every media piece, there is going to be this section of people. Always, there are going to be hardcore people who consume completely everything connected to Transformers, but there's always going to be some who, for whom, what you make is the first thing they see. And it's such a precious thing, because sometimes I see people for whom the comics I am making now is their first introduction to the Transformers, and I'm like, I have to be super careful. Oh no. Like, I'm not entirely responsible, but I kind of am for how people are going to interact with the fandom and how they're going to find their own place. And also, like, I don't really think about retiring now, but I'm so looking forward to who's going to do what to Transformers next. Because it's an ever evolving thing, and everybody is going to leave a bit and a piece of them in it, and it's wonderful. I love Transformers.
Yeah, Transformers is really wonderful. Like, I'm so glad that I discovered it too. It's really been a magical thing to follow and franchise to get into.
Yeah, it's
So,
like it's a giant playground where everybody can find something for themselves and build something for themselves, and I think that's why Transformers fandom is kind of unique in that sense, because there is a lot of, forgive the tautology, the transformative works in the Transformers fandom. uh, I don't think I can say that I read fan fiction, but I do. I am friends with a lot of fan fiction writers, and I appreciate them, and they are amazing people. Like, I can say I actually read fan fiction while working on the official stuff, because they kind of it's a legal thing, basically.
mhm.
So I'm just going to say I greatly appreciate fan fiction writers, and I mean, James Roberts was a
Yeah.
fan fiction writer at one point. So there's a lot of that, and there's a lot of comic artists in the fandom and artists in general, and there's so much creativity that just overflows at any point of time. Is amazing. I love it.
Yeah. I really love it too. So I'm curious then. So what is your favorite Transformers comic?
I mean, the Wrecker saga. I mean, to the point, I have a tattoo of a
Ooh.
quote of Springer's quote from the Requiem of the Wreckers. That's my
Hmm.
only tattoo, and I think Nick owes me a little bit for it. Maybe someday I'll force him to do some fun things together with me, like probably like comic related, but uh, that's like one of my big dreams to make something together with Nick Roche.
Who's your favorite Transformers character and why?
Oh my God, there's like so basically, there's like this scale from which characters I like design wise, which characters I like personality wise, and then there's
Hmm.
also the scale for voice actors because my God, anything Steve Blum does is pretty amazing, and I'm such a huge fan of Frank Welker because he can modulate so many things with his voice, and Greg Berger was Grimlock, and just like I love stuff. And but like I think my favorite characters, if I could detract from um, the iterations and just like pick the characters I would like to talk about, like write stories about, like create something about, it's probably going to be Soundwave because he's great. Like, and he's so rarely explored. He has all these things going on. In some versions there's telepathy, in some versions he can just like spring fully formed energon cubes out of his massive glass city. Then there's also all the cassettes, and there's this history, and he is the most capable Decepticon out of all of them, and you can't help but wonder how did he end up like this.
I know.
Why
I
is
feel
he still there? Why can't he just go off and form his own accountant faction? I think he would make great friends with Ultra Magnus. Like they could be besties, and that would work pretty splendidly. Um, Also, like I like Prowl because
Mhm.
mainly of the IDW works because he's such a controversial person, and there's a lot going on about him, and you can talk about how much of a bastard he is for hours, and it's amazing. Like of course I love Starscream because you can make so much fun things with Starscream because he's a pure chaotic being, and the more you try to in, inject him with a reasoning, I think the more messy it becomes, and it's splendid. Like to see Starscream make a mess out of things is one of the great delights in life. And I think one of like my personal favorites that have very little canon reasoning appearances is Strika.
Mhm.
I love her because she's just like big, giant, mean lady. And she is absolutely unapologetic, and her design is so vivid and loud, and she has a constant grumpy face that's kind of a blend of a headdress that reminds me of traditional Russian headdresses, kokoshnik,
Mhm.
and a gas mask. And I'm just like, damn, that's a look. I would totally rock that if I could.
Yeah, I really like your rendition of her in the comics. Like she
Thank
definitely looks
you.
like one tough lady.
Actually, the thing about Strika, her first appearances in the comic is my fault because there's been, I think, in issue 10 when Megatron's been delivering a great speech about the change in logo of of the Decepticons and their change in direction and course of action, and there's supposed to be a big crowd surrounding him, and there wasn't like a lot of mentioned characters in script there, and there's supposed to be a huge crowd, and I think there was like Acid Storm, Bumblebee, Alita, Red Bat, and I was like, hey, can I add Striker? And then I did it, and then the next month when it came out, it was also the time when me and Brian met in person during the TF Nation. That was actually the first and only time we met in person, sadly, because all of this happened then.
Mm-hmm.
So, and there I was in the bar, quite off my rocker after several pints, just talking about how much I love Striker. And after that, I kept seeing her turning up and up again in the comic, and I was just like, that feels so nice.
Oh, he listens to you.
Yes, I influenced that, and she's actually there, and she does a lot of things, and she will keep doing a lot of things.
Yeah. So, the next question I have for you is, when did you start drawing fan art?
I mean, pretty much the second after I read the records, and I've been drawing Transformers fan art for around 10 years, and the highlight of it was when Tumblr was a big thing, and there have been a lot of fan artists there. And speaking of, like, a lot of the friends with whom I've been drawing fan art back then, they are contributing to the 2019 iteration right now. Yumi Miyao, Beth McGuire Smith. We've known each other for a very long time. Like, I think 5, 6, 7 years maybe even. Like, and we've been drawing a lot of Modern Museum and RID fan art. And here we are now. Yeah, and Winston, and pretty much like it comes to a point where you know every single person who contributes to the thing because they've been a fan alongside you, and it's such a warm feeling. Because the thing is, even the previous generation of not previous generation, they're not dead, they're very
No.
much alive, and they still work so hard. Basically, like Alex and Josh and Jack and James and everybody and Andrew, they've all been fan artists once. Like, they've said on the forums, and they've drawn a lot of fan art, and they've talked a lot with each other, and it's basically like fandom grown official stuff. It's been a thing for a very long time. To say such a thing, I very rarely get any critical feedback beyond, wow, this is great. And 10 years in video games make you worry when you get this stuff, because they're like, oh no, what if there's a mistake that will come later on? Because in video games, there's usually uh, concern of people. There's a concilium, like there's usually a lead artist, then there's art director, then there's production manager, producer. There's a lot of people involved into every decision you ever make. And in comics, there's just you. And yeah, it's a lot of freedom, and it can be quite scary when you come from the different side of the art making. So yeah.
That's really cool that comics is have so much freedom for creativity.
Yes.
Yeah. So, the thing I'm curious about is, would you be able to describe your art process?
Okay, so my art process is I get a script, and then I read it, and then I go to sleep. No, but it's actually super important to get into the vibe with it.
Hmm.
Because and find things you can add, find things you can enhance, and I think every artist ever has such a thing that when they hear certain songs, they have visuals like an animatic playing inside their heads, like their favorite songs, like, oh, this works for a character, this works for this. And a lot of this stuff comes also from reading books when you imagine the visual sequence inside your head. And it's such a vital part of the comics making process to envision how it's going to work, because I can definitely say that whatever I've drawn as a sequential art, I can imagine it being better, but I cannot imagine it being different. because that was how it came to me. And changing the layout, changing the sequence of action, changing the camera angles would not work because I saw it like this and none other way. And so the process is I sleep with it, I come up with layouts for the next 2 3 days. Like I usually can crank out like 6 7 layout pages a day. It's not super speedy because I know people who can lay out the entire issue in one day and say without breaking a sweat. And probably, hopefully, at some point I will be able to get there. And then I just go to town inking. And if we can, this is what I personally like in architecture. This is what I find inspiring and epic. And it's such a fun thing because after I've drawn it, I realize it looks a lot of the architectural stuff I've seen in Moscow. And it's basically like stuff I lived with for my whole life, and it became part of the comic without my conscious choice. It was just like how I view the world. And this is a scary thing because you inadvertently put things in the work that you didn't intend them to be, but it's also the more honest one because you didn't make a choice. The choice made was made through you. Yeah, like something like that.
Wow. Well, very impressive, especially as someone who struggles with backgrounds myself. It's just seeing your work, you can see that these are actual cities that they live in. And you can tell that you've put the thought and care into creating those cities for them and those spaces. So
Thank you.
thank you for doing that.
To be honest, I actually struggled with backgrounds as well.
Oh.
But it's like, this love-hate relationship because they
Hmm.
do take a long time, but it's worth it. Like having background outweighs actually the pain of making one.
Hmm.
Like
Hmm.
I do enjoy putting them, and I've been comparing a lot of my early pages that I've done for issue 5, 7, 8 with the pages I've been doing recently. And I'm like, I hope I don't get more detailed than this because I would not be able to survive. It only gets worse. Like, wait till you see issue 28 and 29. There's more stuff.
Oh, wow. Well, I'll be
Oh,
keeping my eyes open for those issues. I've got my subscription and I go and pick them up as soon as they're
thank you.
released. Yeah. So, in regards to your work, do you have any mentors and inspirations for your art?
Mean, I would love to have a mentor who would actually like um, do a critique because comics are such a, as I've said, very singular production thing because you don't actually show your process to a lot of people, and all the decision you make on yourself. And after a while, like I realize like there's a lot of introspection going on because you start realizing what layouts you use and why. At first it's just like, yeah, I think those panels look neat together and like these camera zoom works neat together. And after a while you start thinking about, okay, this is actually the action line of the reader's eye, and this is the balance between action and composition. And then you start thinking about the narrative dominant or visual dominant things, and like which one is more important to emphasize. And if I had a mentor who would actually explain stuff to me, that would be great, because like I've always approached comics with as a reader. Like haven't even thought I would do this professionally for a living at any point in my life. I was just like, yeah, people who make comics are amazing. Like, I'm just going to be on the sidelines and root for them. And then suddenly at some point I became one and I was like, oh no, what the hell am I doing? uh, so yeah, but mm, your own personal introspection is the most important tool you have. Reading as much as you can, and even beyond the fandom. Like, I read a lot of stuff from Marvel and DC and Image, all the different publishers, and I read a lot of manga and bande dessinée, and basically I consume a lot of stuff, and I can't like pinpoint which exact artists and works influenced me the most. You just have this giant library inside your head, and everything you've read, it accumulates in some sort of an experience you can then use for creating works. So I think my biggest advice would be read as much as you can, analyze as much as you can. Like, if you see something that you really like, try to find out why it works. Like, dissect it inside your head. Like, why some margins for the panels are better than the others. Like, why some angles work and some don't. How to uh, put text so that it won't be invasive, or maybe if you wanted the text to be invasive, like how to connect it with the actual art. It's like comics is such a mm, giant bit of stuff that's very rarely analyzed. I think I know like two or three people who actually do like professional analysis of comics. And by the way, like, I'm going to recommend watching Panel X Panel and pay attention to anything that Hassan Asman Al Hau makes, because his 3 panel naked YouTube videos are greatly useful, because even if it's the thing you know about how a comic is made, there's a lot of discussion that basically jumpstarts your brain. So whenever I'm in a rut and whenever I don't know how to make the comic work, I just like watch a couple of videos, read a couple of my favorite books, sit and stare at the sunsets for a while, and then I have it.
Mhm. Yeah.
There's a lot of that going on.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for sharing those recommendations for artists and people who want to improve their art. That's
No
really good
problem at all.
advice.
Also, there is one very good book about how to structure the panels,
Hmm.
um, Framed Ink. I sadly don't remember the author, but it deals a lot with composition in a panel and in the page, like surface versus structure. It's also very important to uh, take in as much material as you can so that some of it may stay inside of your head.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah. So you mentioned it earlier that you didn't think that you'd become an official Transformers
Oh, hell
artist.
no.
So what was, how did you become an official Transformers artist, if you can share that?
It's super easy. When it was announced that the previous uh, iteration of the comics were coming to an end, that there's going to be a reboot. And I've been asking people I've known in the comics, like if I could be of use for some time before that. I was like, Man, I would really love to do a cover, just like I have like a bucket list, and maybe making one cover would be great. And when
Mhm.
the reboot happened, I basically said the same thing to David Marriott, and I was just like, hey, like even if it's not Transformers, like I also really dig different series from IDW. I would greatly love to contribute, and I basically made like several test images for the covers. And then he asked me like, hey, what do you want to draw interiors? And for that my first answer was like, oh hell no, because I have no experience making that. So after that I spent like several months making my own comic that I finished a whole chapter of, and actually got a feel of how to make comics and how much time it takes me, and how much brain activity is needed from me to make one. And then like in the meantime I also made a couple covers for issue 3 and issue 7, the one with Cyclonus and the one with the mural with Optimus and Megatron. And
Mhm.
IDW really liked them, and I was like, oh, that's really nice. So then I just like came to David again and was like, hey, I know I was really stupid back then, but what can I make some pages?
Mhm.
And he was like, yeah, there's like issue 5, you can make like 3 pages there. And I was like, cool. And I spent an ungodly time amount for them, and they didn't come out like as good as I imagined them in my eye. And I remember paying such close attention to the quality of my line works, so I ended up not doing much of it. They were quite empty, but I guess David saw something that he liked in there. So the next time he came to me with, hey, can you do some pages for issue 7 and 8 with Cyclonus? And I was like, hell yeah, I love Cyclonus.
Mhm.
And I read the script and I was like, oh, this is a really fun Cyclonus. Like I want to draw a lot more of that. And after that, it was like 7 pages there, like 10 pages there, and that was a period when the comic was released by months, not by monthly, once every 2 weeks.
Uh-huh.
And frankly, it's not a pace during which you can feasibly expect one person to make a comic. Like in any way, it was a very fast production. So there's been at the very least 2 people drawing every single issue while it lasted, like
Mhm.
from 2 up to 4, I think, at some point. And it still was very fast. And but there, it was also like a trial by fire. After we finished making comic every 2 weeks, I felt like, yeah, I can like actually deal with the publishing deadlines. I can actually like work with that. Like that would be okay. And then they just approached me and like, can you like do the majority of pages? And then I freaked out again and I was like, hey, can I have Beth with me? Because I really dig Beth art. And
Mhm.
she draws amazingly actiony filled, like very dynamic things that just like a constant inspiration. And I just like looking at them. So there was a period when we both worked on the same issues, sharing like 10, 15 pages between us. Uh, and then I was left alone because Beth moved on to working with single issues and working on Escape, and so that like I'm having fun and I'm accidentally getting paid for it. Great.
That's
But
awesome.
yeah, they're like the deadlines and keeping up with everything, and also remember like the bane of my existence is drawing insignias, because there's always going to be like at least one insignia I forget during an issue, and then I'm like, god damn it, like I was so sure it had to be there, because like there's also been a transitional period in the comic plot when some people had insignias and some didn't, and I was just like, my brain fried. Like I kept forgetting to draw them on several characters, and thankfully not a lot of people pay attention to that.
Mhm.
But yeah, like I moved on from that, and now I draw them. I remember to draw them almost every time, but yeah.
Mhm. Is that something that like you'll send that in and then someone will tell you, oh hey, we need the insignia marks on
Yeah,
here?
yeah. Thankfully, I have Brian and David, and basically, like, I've made a thing like
Hmm.
where every person who is involved into making a comic can actually see pages happen almost in real time, and it's basically like a giant shared space where I upload the pages once I'm done with
Hmm.
them, and Brian and David and all the editors get notifications, so they can actually like project how much time it's going to take me to draw them, and I can have a conversation with them about how it's being created, and it's a lot more close to how video games are made, because when you finish a video game task, you're just like, hey, here it is. All the departments that are going to be involved into implementing it. Here's how it looks like. And I kind of try to push it into the comics in some ways. So now there is a lot of conversation going on between every party created, every party involved in the creating of the comics. So now I don't forget anything because there are people who can remind me about it.
Hmm. Well, it sounds like there's a lot of collaboration with all the different people involved, which is really
Oh
good.
yeah, yes, definitely.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of like a good thing about collaboration is the narrative and the structure and the art only gets richer because a lot more people can have a conversation. If you get a script and then you have to draw it and that's your entire involvement, you are going to be a lot more modest. uh, if a lot more modest compared to if you were to closely interact with an editor, the writer, the colorist, because you could give them ideas and they can give you ideas, and there's a lot of this back and forth. And coming back to issue 25, the location of the final segment, the bar thing, I actually came up with it. Brian wrote like some just like put it into some civilian looking shabby building, and I was like,
Hmm.
I want it to happen in a bar. I want
Hmm.
Sentinel to die on the floor of a dirty bar. This is going to be great. Like, let's do
Hmm.
this. And everybody supported me, and that's how it happened. And there's a lot of this stuff because sometimes I draw a character, and sometimes Brian comes up with a thing, and sometimes
Hmm.
Brian just writes like, I have no idea how it's going to work, but
Hmm.
here's the dialogue, and here's the vague sense of how it's going to happen,
Hmm.
which was the case for, again, issue 25, the panels with Cadex's Ghost, the Matrix, and Optimus. It was actually, it was more like a free script where there was just dialogue, and Brian just like, do whatever you want, like do the
Hmm.
best of it. And I was like, I have an idea. This is going to be hell to draw, but this is going to be so much fun. And yeah, it turned out pretty great, and people loved it. And I'm just, yes, success.
I
So
really
excited
loved.
about how it came out.
So I know you talked about this a bit earlier with adding Strika into the comics. So in regards to adding in extra characters, have you been able to add in other characters that weren't originally in the script? Like for example, like Trick Diamond, that was super awesome to see in a past issue.
Well, Trick Diamond was written by Brian because she
Hmm.
has dialogue, she has character development, and she has specific lines, and he thinks a lot about how who are the characters who actually are involved in the plot. And uh, back until I think issue 18, I sometimes added like stuff that was not script directed.
Hmm.
Then I actually asked Brian about it, and he was like, I don't control it, so I don't really like it. And I was like, yeah, I get it. I absolutely get it. I will stop doing that. And I think
Mhm.
like the bane of my existence is issue 20, when there was like a giant page inside Swindle's Casino with a
Mhm.
lot of characters,
Mhm.
and Brian specified like a very little number of them, and the rest of them I came up with. Like it was completely my idea, but I did talk with David Marriott, who I'm going to use there.
Mhm.
So it worked out mostly fine for a single exact thing. There's Pipes sitting in the audience, and he is
Uh,
actually a member of Senate Guard. And I was like,
what?
this contradicts the script. Oh no, this is
Oh
all my fault.
no.
This is everything's going to be ruined now. Because the next issue I gotta draw is he is part of this Senate Guard, and I was like, oh my god, I fibbled it. Like I actually made a mistake. Now people are going to wonder how did he how did that happen? So yeah, like after issue 20, I've stopped adding characters entirely, and if there's a call for a crowd, and there's been a lot of calls for a crowd,
Mhm.
I just
Yes.
usually come up with different designs on the go. I
Mhm.
just draw a Cybertronians that like conform, make up the generic more or less crowd,
Mhm.
and sometimes just like make some extra designs. There's been a really fun design I made for issue 26, a girl, a really buff girl with like a giant horn that shows up in like two panels, and maybe
Ooh.
someday Brian will write a character for her. But I'm just like, yeah, I'm just going to come up with characters and not bother with any things that aren't there in the script, because my god, there's a lot of stuff in the script already.
Oh yeah, I remembered seeing that panel in Swindle's Casino, and I was just really impressed. And I thought, oh my gosh, this has been a lot of work and time for you to draw,
Oh
Anna.
god, yeah. I remember when I was drawing it, I was like, this is going to be my magnum opus. This is going to be the best page I've ever drawn.
Hmm.
And then after I've drawn it, I was like, I want another one. I want a better one. Like, okay, now this is done, and I want to make a better, bigger one. And so the next bigger thing was the Senate meeting, and
Hmm.
every senator has their own design.
Wow.
But they are mostly concealed in shapes, and I can absolutely understand that, because like coloring every single person like as a like as voluminous as the main character would have been hell.
Hmm.
So yeah, like I just design stuff.
Wow. Sounds like it's a lot of fun though, and you've
Oh
learned a
yes.
lot from it. So, in regards to when you're making comics, what are your must-have items and tools that you have for making them?
I work entirely in Photoshop.
Mm-hmm.
I've been working digitally for my entire career.
Mm-hmm.
I still consider like traditional art for me personally as a hobby. Like when my eyes get tired and I still want to draw, I just like let's crank out some watercolors.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so yeah, I've been working in Photoshop, and I've been using it for video games for a very long time. So it's been super easy to transition to comics. And I know a lot of people work in Clip Studio Paint, and I've heard only praises about that program. But personally, I'm diehard Photoshop person. Not a fan, because you can't be a fan of Adobe products. They
No.
only get worse.
Mm-hmm.
But I've come so used to working in it, and I have all my hotkeys, and I have several brushes I've made, and they are mostly like the most basic anti-aliasing brushes that has like no grayscale thing. Like they're just like straight black with some noises, so that make them look more real, like more like pencils and inks rather than digital stuff. And yeah, just like I draw in Photoshop.
Hmm.
Like the one thing I try to do most is approach every page as singular things so that I don't copy backgrounds from previous issues. I don't copy the things I've already drawn. Like everything I try to draw all over again. And it's a
Hmm.
bit counterproductive, but it makes page look very much more alive.
So, I actually have a question about your original work. Could you tell us more about Seeds of the World?
Oh, I haven't actually worked on it for 2 years, so uh, I've been so involved with Transformers, so I don't
Hmm.
really pay attention to. But like, it's a project I always have on the back burner. So uh, once Transformers are done with me, because I don't feel like I would be in a mental space for a really long while to actually divorce myself from Transformers. But at some
Hmm.
point, things like that do happen. Like people move on and things change. Then I think I will come back to Seed of the World, or maybe I'll have another idea. And I actually like had several ideas for the stories I would love to make in the Transformers universe, like
Hmm.
actually write and draw stuff. Maybe someday, I don't know, like I'll actually have to discuss it with someone at some point, but I do think of stuff that I would love to make. But getting back to City of the World, it's basically came out of the idea of my God, there's so much science fiction in the world that is mostly concerned with humans, and it's mostly human shaped, and all the species are human shaped, and this is bullshit. I really want some science fiction about non-human people with the cast that's mostly aliens, and with how the human interact, like a singular human interacts with the world that's so much more richer than their own culture, so much more wildly different. And it kind of spun out of that for into an idea about human race dying out, and only a very limited amount of members are being left in the universe that are very much hostile towards it, and how they divorce from that hostility into actually um, moving on and becoming part of that universe. But it's like it's a very long project. I currently have script for, I think, 12 stories, 12 20-page stories, and I've only completed one. So maybe someday I will come back to it, but I believe at that point I would be so sick of how I've drawn that first chapter, so I would have to rework it.
Hmm.
So yeah, like personal projects are like that. You can lay them off for a while, and then you can come back to them. And yeah, I'll maybe rework it a bit.
Well, I loved what I saw of it.
Thank you.
I thought it was really, the art is always fabulous. And, I hope you're able to pick it up again someday or work on another story of your own. Yeah.
Well,
So,
when I do, I'll have a whole lot more experience, and
mhm.
maybe something actually worthwhile comes out of it.
Yeah. Well, so for this last part, we're going to talk about some of your favorites. So,
Ooh.
in regards to your favorites, who is your favorite IDW2 character?
Oh my God. The bane of an artist is while you're drawing a character, you always infuse them with a bit of yourself, and you also fall in love with them because you are trying to depict the most honest and true to the script version of them, and
Mhm.
make it as real as possible. And Like, okay, making a tiny detour.
Hmm.
I don't read a lot of reviews right now. Like, I actually stopped reading them, but while I was reading them, I noticed that some people praised a lot of how I depict emotions, and I was like, that's just how I draw. Like, I don't actually care a lot about the emotional part. It's just like
Hmm.
that's how I see the stuff happening, and that's how it comes out.
Hmm.
There's not a lot of conscious thought, but then I realized, my God, I actually do a lot of conscious thinking about how characters act and how they interact with each other and how to show their emotions the best. Because the emotions that Brian puts into script are so deliciously tense. My God, it's so delightful to read it. So yeah, but like coming back to who's my favorite character is the one that probably hurt me most while drawing them,
Hmm.
uh, the one who had the most emotional impact so far. And it's Bumblebee, because his whole narrative line of going further down into, uh, I can't say depression, but mourning, coming through the grief, through all stages of grief with a blazing sword.
Hmm.
It's like watching a train wreck. You can't take your eyes off it. It's delightful. And I also really like Cyclonus. And when Issue 28 comes out, God, it's going to be fun. Um, I think one of my favorites is also Six Shot, because there's not a lot of unhingedness about him. He's a very practical person, and so it's my complete opposite, because not to say I'm unhinged, but I'm a very emotional person. So trying to put your mind into somebody calm and collected and making tactical decisions everywhere they go is so much fun. And also, of course, I love Megatron, because he tries to spin everything around himself. He tries to be the catalyst for everything that's going on, and it's always fun and scary to watch people do that in fiction, because in real life it's just scary. Like, and trying to make it believable is quite fun. And oh, and of course, all the ladies. Like, I love drawing ladies, because
Hmm.
um, there's been a time when there wasn't a lot of female transformers present in the media, and the time when we had like RC and Delita and several barely named girls in G1, and then there's like a token girl characters in several iterations, and now there's like Brian takes I don't think he takes uh, he makes a conscious like effort to infuse the script with girls. It's just like it works so naturally, and you're just like, why not? Like, why not make this giant transforming citadel into a girl? Why not make the ageless, wise inventor who transformed the entire Cybertron into a woman? And
Well, thank you for that, for sharing your thoughts on that. It's just as I said, really cool seeing, all the women in the comics now and just hearing your perspective on them.
like,
So,
I can't take all the credit for that, because Brian writes amazing women. Brian writes very real, very engaging characters,
mhm.
and I have so much fun drawing them. And uh, there's a lot of this coming off the script, and I'm here for the ride, and I enjoy doing what I do, because it's written in this perfect way that's just plain old fun.
Mhm. Yeah, I love his writing. It's really amazing. So we've got one more question because I'm looking at the time and I'm like, oh wow, time goes by really fast. So we skipped some of the questions and I'm just like,
Yeah,
I'm
no
just having
problem.
such a good time. So thank you so much. So
No worries at all.
I want to ask you, what is your favorite panel that you've drawn or page and why?
I mean, some of my favorite, like every issue has my favorite ones, and
Hmm.
right now my favorite is the one I've drawn today.
Ooh.
But the ones I've greatly enjoyed and really loved how it turned out in recent history was issue 22 when Bumblebee shanks Quake. That was
Hmm.
such a visceral sequence because there's beyond the action itself, there's an emotion on Bumblebee's face that changes from shock to determination to quiet grief, and it all works in concert so well, and I'm super proud of that. And then there is an attack on Senate in issue 23, and there's like a giant page where double spread where rainmakers drop and Nova Storm explodes, and it's been one of my favorites. And I mean, every issue has something. And issue 26, like every panel with Pira Magna, I love drawing her. I'm so excited she is back.
Hmm.
She's part of the story now, and I'm just yes, she's great. Uh, but yeah, like I think to my own personal surprise, I found that I really enjoy drawing action and gore and dismemberment and like heavy bodily harm coming to characters. And because it's robots, it's removed from life a bit. Because if you would imagine the same thing happening to human beings, you would be sick to your stomach. And that would be
Hmm.
something like Garth Ennis' work. And while I do appreciate his stuff, I wouldn't like they work for the shock value,
Hmm.
more or less. And here, because it's Transformers, you can have it part of the story right alongside a very tender moments or very epic ones, and not be something shocking that takes you out of the narrative. But you can still have all the fun with the gore.
Hmm.
Yeah, there's that.
Wow. Yeah, well, thank you so much for your time, Anna.
No
You
worries
can,
at all.
yeah, this is a really fun conversation and getting to learn more about you and about the process of creating comics and the behind the scenes on IDW 2.0. So you can
Thank you so
find
much for inviting me. It was a pleasure talking to you, and I'm looking forward to the convention. I will be there watching everything.
we're super excited to have you as a part of it. So thank you so much. You can find Anna's work on the new IDW comic line of Transformers comics. So check that out at your local comic book shop. You can find Anna on social media at Anna double underscore Malkova on Twitter, and her website is a-malkova.com. Till all are one.
Bye.